Um, the audio quality on this video might suck a little bit. So if it does, I apologize. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about this fencing video that John and Rowan produced. But before I do that, I want to kind of like make a disclaimer and say that, I have nothing but the highest amount of respect for these guys, and what they're doing is great. And this is just me disagreeing and trying to offer a different perspective, not like trying to make beef happen or anything stupid like that. So I have some questions though, and I want to point out some countervailing examples because I'm a little worried that not everybody can do what they do as well as they do it. And I want to show that there's some value in a different way of approaching your fight. So I'm old and probably put on a little too much weight over COVID to be uh, fighting at anywhere near this competitive level if I ever was before. But I want to talk about a couple of things, a couple of claims that were made in that video, and offer an opportunity for some debate. So I am interested in the notion that, first of all, there is a superior way to fence. I think there's a lot of inferior ways to fence, and I think John and Rowan would agree with me. But I don't know, when you start comparing good ways to fence, if there really truly is a best or a superior way to fence. And I have some issues with the sword refused as a ideal. I don't have a problem with it as a fencing style. I have a problem with it as it being presented as an ideal way to fence. I don't know that the sword presented is ideal, although I've made that argument in the past, and so this is me walking that back a little bit too. But I don't know that sword refused is ideal. I also don't think it's new. I think it's been around for a really long time. I definitely think like John Miguel and company have kind of perfected it, but it's not new. It's been sort of the way that Onsteora fences for a very long time. I just think that it got refined under these guys to a pretty high degree. So anyway, let me get into it. So I'm sharing my screen right now because there's a couple of fights that I want to show, um, because I want to show the value of fighting sword forward. I'm going to start with John versus Cato in the on Steer and Rose. So in the first bout that they fought, it went for a really long time. And Cato definitely, I think Cato is one of the best sword forward fencers. Like, I wish I looked this good when I was in my prime fighting sword forward. I think Cato is one of my favorite fencers to watch fence. He's fighting John. This is, if I'm not mistaken, I'm sitting in the audience loving every minute of this, or I'm standing over the side, loving this fight. But I want to talk about it because I want to show a moment here, bit by bit. This is the first of their best 2 out of 3. Hopefully this is playing. I think what Cato is doing here is really smart. He is keeping his sword largely on the line below John's dagger, and not taking the bait, trying to force it. And I think that he's largely in control of measure in this fight. I don't know if John would agree with that, but there's a moment coming up where that gets answered. And we'll show it bit by bit. There it is. So in that fight, that's the best 2 out of 3. But John lost the duel. He lost the first one. I think that matters. In that, both of these guys are fighting top of their game, and I find that to be kind of an equalizer. There's a give and a take what both of these guys are doing. So, Cato has a sword in presence. John has to address it. He doesn't have a choice. John has a sword out of presence. Cato can't gain it. And so Cato has to try to bait the dagger, or he has to take advantage of the fact that John's not in presence, which is, I think, how he wins this bout. He gets him just with a straight shot down the center line, and his sword is closer to John than John's sword is to Cato. And it might be closer to Jon than Jon's sword is to Cato's sword. So the only thing Cato has to beat is Jon's dagger, which is admittedly a tall order, but he does it in that moment and gets a touch. Um, in the depending on how you approach the game, right? So let's say they do this 10 times. Jon wins 6, Cato wins 4, Jon wins 7, Cato wins 3. They did it 2 out of 3, and Cato won the first one. That matters from my perspective. And then they're going to fight for a really long time. And so Cato holds Jon off maybe longer than anybody else that I've seen do in a while, with the exception of like Boomy, etc. Truly, truly top-notch people. I think that's worth lauding. That's worth considering and thinking about, because Cato is doing what Jon and Rowan are saying in their video is inferior, that he's doing something that is less good, or less ideal, or less optimal. And I think this is an example of how it is still perfectly viable in terms of success. I want to show another one too. Same tournament, he's fighting JG. I want to show this exchange, a pause at this exchange, because it's an example of what I'm talking about. So there's a little exchange here. They're going to dance a little bit. JG's a lefty. That changes the game a little bit. But I want you to watch why JG lands what he lands. Boom. All right. So let me go back. I learned how to do this today, and I'm very proud I can do tiny little things. So JG's sword remains in presence out in front of his dagger. Jon's going to come in. He's going to drop back. JG is capable of picking it up with his dagger, and then can riposte to get where he needs to go, leading with his front sword. The reason JG can hit Jon in this place, in my estimation, or from my point of view, is because Jon has to get very close to throw the shot he needs to throw, because his sword is refused. On his way out, JG can follow the tempo of that escape, and can land his shot as Jon is retreating. To go further. And then they get into this whole like meat market thing where they beat on each other, and it's double. It's fine. But I think that first shot, assuming I'm not crazy and that shot didn't land, it looks like it's got a good bend. It looks like it's a good shot. Is that JG, I think if he had been fighting truly refused in the initiating pass. So Jon's got to dig deep because there's a sword in presence. And so he digs deep for his lunge, and JD gives enough ground, picks it up, and he is prepared to strike. If he had been in a refuse stance, I don't know that he would have been in the same boat, because his defensive option would have been very limited. It would have been dagger only. It would have been in a place where he would have been backing up to defend himself, giving ground to defend himself. And I don't think he would have had the same amount of distance to come forward. People could disagree, but I think it's an example. I wanted to look at myself from a time when I was, a little younger and a little bit faster. So if I take the video that was presented as gospel, and I say to myself that this T-squared stance is inferior, and that it's less fast or less good at getting what it needs to do, and that if my sword is out, then it's going to give my opponent sort of like an obvious clue into what I'm doing, etc., then I have a question about this fight with Alessandro. So this is Alessandro. He's a past Queen's champion of Onstore. He's an excellent, top-notch fencer. And at the time, this is a decade ago, he was, I would argue, probably at the top or near the top of his game at the time. I was definitely fighting uphill in this fight, in my estimation, in terms of just quality of fencer. And I'm gonna go through this fight here little by little. And see and show you. First, I'm going to show it to you, then I'm going to go back. So this is very quick. There's actually 2 of these in a row. All right. So that's Peter Rausch, who's a past Queen's champion as well. That's the semis of this Queen's. I wound up in the finals of this Queen's. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride. But this is probably the top of my fencing, in my estimation. back when I was younger and on fire. So let's go back. I'll watch this whole thing. So I'm doing exactly what I'm told in that previous video I shouldn't do. So I have my sword in presence against a person who's fighting refused with their dagger straight out. I am taking a time to gain the inside of his sword, and then I am going to use that time to come up with the top of his dagger. Happy days, guys. Look at this little double tap lunge. You know, talked about it last time. You guys have another video on that. This is exactly what's going on here. I do step a little to the outside of the line, so I'm stepping slightly to the right of my opponent, and I'm going to disengage that dagger and drill him in the chest. So this is the weakness, in my estimation, in my opinion, of the dagger forward stance, which is the vulnerability of the dagger against a tight disengage under or over the top of it in tempo. If I back up or if I give ground when when this begins, then I'm in trouble. I originated the time, I got him into motion, I disengaged the dagger, I hit him in the body. My sword's forward. I'm in a T-shaped stance. I shouldn't be able to do this, but I did. And I don't think it's because I'm tall, because Alessandro is shorter, but he's way faster. So I don't know that that's the reason. I think that this is vulnerability, and I think John would probably agree with it. I think he's very good at compensating for it. But bam. So the second one I wanted to point out too is similar in that my opponent, Peter Rausch, is in a low-lying blade stance. So he's doing this low blade stance. I don't even have my sword in presence. The only thing he's defending himself with is a dagger. And if you watch very carefully, my hand moves before my foot. You can see the dagger, you can see the sword blade down to the left. The sword begins to go into motion, and then I go into motion, and bam, down the center line. I'm in a T-shaped stance again. I'm kind of being casual. I'm in a T-shaped stance again. My dagger's not even, I'm not bothering my dagger, which is a huge mistake. But he doesn't have a weapon in presence. And the dagger that he has in presence is not in a good spot to stop it. So that low-lying guard has a vulnerability too. And that is that we are relying on a short object to stop a long object that has more time to operate or change plans in flight than the dagger does if the hand moves first. So my hand moves first, and I got all day. I can pick it. Boom. He tries to get the sword up in time. He does not. That's it. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is if that video is universally correct, then Alessandro should have killed me, and I shouldn't have been able to hit Pete because I'm doing the wrong thing, or I'm doing something that is inferior to this. And I think that's kind of a problem that I have, is that the video doesn't seem to look at the question from the other side of the coin. What other reasons might there have been for a given exchange to be different? Could it only be the style, or could there be other reasons at play? I'm in the video. I get smoked by a Miguel, which is, a thing that happens to people who fight Miguel. And I probably would have lost that fight anyway. I would say that I'm on a postage stamp of a list. So I actually had to fight within Miguel's measure. I didn't have much of a choice about that. And I would suspect that Miguel, even though he's a decent amount shorter than me, he's not a lot shorter than me, but he's shorter than me. Everybody is. But I was in his measure. He's just faster, and he moved when I moved, which was great fencing. But I don't think I lost because my sword was in presence. I think I lost because I made a mistake and took a tempo in Miguel's measure, and he ate my lunch for it. So one of my concerns is that someone might come to this video and take away from it the lesson that fighting with your sword in presence is a bad idea or a mistake or inferior or whatever. And they're going to get themselves killed over and over and over and over again with a disengage against the dagger because they aren't y'all. Even today, when I'm out of shape and not fencing my best, probably fencing my worst I have in about 15 years, I'll probably kill 80% of the people who do this. Maybe 90, 80. Let's say 80. And I'll probably get them 7 out of 10. It's the top 25 fencers that's not the case. 30 fencers that's not the case. And I'm not that great. I just have a good disengage. So I don't know. Like, I think there's more to what y'all are doing that's making it work than the fact that your sword isn't in presence. I think your sword not being in presence is fine. It's definitely historical. It's definitely workable. It's obviously successful. But I think there are other factors at play that make that like the thing that people who typically win the big tournaments at Gulf or at Pennsic win. I mean, to be clear, Cato was in the top four, top five of the OnStar and Rose tournament, and he fought that way all day. So I don't think we can look at what he was doing and say it's a mistake. I think what he's doing is excellent. And I think he was successful at it. He didn't win the day, but I mean, at 250 person Rose tournament, and you're standing there at the top 4 and 5, and the other people in the room are Boomy John and Rowan. I mean, like maybe it's not such a bad way to fight. Um, I think it's a good way to fight, and I think different people have to fight differently. Uh, I think that having different things in your wheelhouse and understanding its advantages and disadvantages is good. Um, so that's my beef. I think I disagree with the notion that there is an inferior that fighting with your sword and presence is inferior. Even if today I can't show that to you directly by beating John 50% of the time, I can't do it. I just can't. Well, I beat a lot of people 50% of the time who do it. Um, and I think that matters. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's what I disagree with. And I'm going to put this on your Discord before I put it out anywhere. I don't think I'm going to put it out publicly, but I want you to look at it and think about it, and maybe think about the argument that you made, and that there might be more to it than that. Stop recording like this.